I created this account just so I could post this, but I've been a silent reader for a while. My entitled family ended up in prison or paying a lot of money after I came back home following several years away and started a revolution. So, this is a very complicated situation, and I'm honestly lost. I've been told both that I'm an asshole and that I'm not for what I did. Context: I currently have full custody of my 2 younger sisters. The 17-year-old we'll call Amy, and the 8-year-old Liza. I'm 29. I fought extremely hard for months to get custody of my sisters, because I come from a long line of entitled people. That's the nicest way I can put it. I have several uncles and grandparents who believed they were entitled to Amy, and later to Liza once she turned 10. I had left home 7 years ago, and honestly, I was pretty lazy about keeping in touch with my family because I moved very far away for school and work. I came back to visit shortly before it had been 6 years since I left, and the situation I found was that my parents were allowing Amy to be physically abused. To give a small example, they used her allergies to torture her until she obeyed. So I did what I had to do and managed to get Amy and Liza placed under my custody. If people want the full story, I might post it in the Entitled Parents subreddit, but that part isn't really what this sub is about. Now let's focus on the title of my post. A few weeks ago, my mom contacted me on Facebook asking if we could meet up, just the 2 of us, to talk. I agreed and met with her. She explained that she was divorcing my dad and cutting ties with his side of the family, the side that had allowed all of this to happen. She said that after she got pregnant with me, she felt forced to marry my father. She said she never wanted that life for my sisters, and that she wanted to repair her relationship with Amy, who still has a lot of issues because of how she was treated. I told her no, absolutely not. She would never see Amy or Liza again, and if she tried, I would file for a restraining order. Everything I had heard from Amy showed that my mom never once seemed concerned about her health or well-being during the time I was gone. So, am I the asshole for wanting to keep her out of my sisters' lives? Edit 1. Thanks for the platinum. Edit 2. This keeps getting asked a lot, but Amy is still in regular therapy and she's very fragile when it comes to that time in her life. It's still something she deals with day by day. Liza was never hurt. They were preparing her for obedience, but things would have changed once she turned 10, like what happened with Amy. Liza went to therapy for a few months, but it was decided she didn't need long-term therapy like Amy does. Edit 3. I have the whole story written out, but the subreddit won't let me post it until my account is 4 days old. I'll post it then and add another edit once it's up. Edit 4. The full story, or at least part of it, is now up on the Entitled Parents subreddit, and I'll post updates there about what happens with my mom and my sisters. Thank you to everyone who has shown support and interest in our story. Update 1. I originally posted part of this asking if I was the jerk because of a recent conflict I'll mention later that made me doubt myself. But because so many people were interested, I've decided to explain here the unbelievable sense of entitlement in my family. I currently have custody of my 2 younger sisters, and we live in Australia. I'm called Potato because that's what Liza calls me. This is basically the story of how my family believed they were entitled to the bodies of my 2 sisters, and how I wasn't going to allow that. I'd like to warn anyone who has suffered abuse in the past, because parts of this story may be triggering. And to anyone who has experienced abuse before, I'm deeply sorry. The main part of this story happened about a year ago. At that point, I had moved away 6 years earlier. I left for another state for work and school. Honestly, I was very lazy about keeping in contact with my family, which is probably why this went on for so long. When I think about the time before I moved away, I didn't treat Amy very well either. If I hadn't moved and had so little contact with my family, I might have ended up just as entitled and just as bad as they were. I came back to visit for one of my grandfather's birthdays. After being away so long, I spent the morning catching up with aunts, uncles, cousins, my parents, and of course Liza. And this was really the first time I noticed how strange my family was. Maybe it was the change of environment. Some of my roommates had little sisters, and I guess I had something to compare it to. But it was the first time I noticed how quiet the young girls in my family were. I always thought Amy was just shy and quiet, but my younger cousins were the same way, polite, shy, quiet, and obedient. At the time, though, I brushed it off. After a few hours, I realized I hadn't seen Amy all day. The party was at my parents' house, so I got confused and slipped inside to see if she was hiding in her room like a lot of 16-year-olds do, talking with friends or doing homework. What I found is a memory that will haunt me forever. My oldest uncle on my dad's side was on top of my sister. She was clearly in pain and struggling not to cry while he held her down beneath him. I completely lost control, like any brother would. I screamed at him to get off her and get the hell out of her room. I scared both of them badly, but honestly, at that moment I was ready to kill my uncle. Amy was completely out of it when I tried to comfort her. She was covered in scars. She had a rash that I later learned was an allergic reaction. She's allergic to strawberries. She wouldn't speak. She just looked at me like she expected me to hurt her too. Her room was dimly lit. The blinds had been taped shut against the wall. Everything she had owned when I left was gone, leaving her room cold and empty. And on top of all that, she was several months pregnant. When I demanded an explanation from my parents, they basically said it was my uncle's right. My father even pointed to one of my 11-year-old cousins sitting quietly with her parents and told me to go have fun. I stormed back to Amy's room. I silently packed a bag for her with essentials and managed to get her out of the house and into my car. Then I did the same with Liza. Part of me wanted to take all my cousins too, but my priority was Amy, who was shaking in the back seat. I drove both of them to the nearest police station to report what was happening. I'll skip most of the details of the legal battle that followed, but my family did not take it well when they were exposed for what they had been doing. According to them, it was a tradition that had gone on for generations, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with tradition. Amy and Liza were temporarily placed in foster homes. Amy was completely shattered. As far as she was concerned, anyone could and would hurt her. I was getting reports every few hours that she was having panic attacks. 3 of my uncles went to prison for a very long time. I managed to obtain a large amount of money from several family members and full custody of Amy and Liza, with no mandatory visitation with our parents. My parents were ordered to pay for all therapy, medication, and medical needs for both of them. My family split in two because of this. Many of my aunts left their husbands with their children after finally finding the courage to follow my lead. Some uncles who had married into the family took their wives, who had also been abused, and cut ties. I still keep in contact with these family members, and I'm grateful for their support. I'm glad my cousins are safer now. Even some of the older men who grew up thinking it was normal to treat women that way went to therapy once they realized how twisted it was. I've had more than one situation where they admitted they had hurt Amy and apologized. I accepted those apologies because those cousins did everything they could to remove their siblings or other cousins from dangerous environments. I think part of the ruling also protected the younger men in the family on the condition that they see mental health professionals, since they grew up thinking this was normal. So they didn't end up in prison, but they are probably on some kind of watch list for potential offenders. I'm not entirely sure. No one knows who the father of Amy's baby was. The pregnancy was terminated because we were told her physical and mental health would not survive carrying a baby that she likely wouldn't be able to care for. She consented at the time, and her psychologist mentioned it again once Amy was doing better. Amy confirmed that she wouldn't feel any love for the baby because of the circumstances in which she got pregnant. For 6 years, Amy had been abused physically, sexually, mentally, and emotionally in every way imaginable. Most of it came from my father's 4 brothers and the brother-in-law who married into the family. Both of my parents stood by and let it happen without offering Amy any support. During the case, my uncles argued that it was their birthright because they were born into that family, and that it was simply Amy's rite of passage before being married off to a friend. They planned to marry her off to a friend of one of my uncles when she turned 18. They used her allergy as a method of torture and manipulation. They wanted her to be quiet and obedient, so they would press strawberries against her skin whenever she spoke and force her to eat them whenever she stepped out of line. Many of my aunts on my father's side admitted they had suffered the same treatment, although most of them were lucky enough not to have allergies that could be exploited. Honestly, I can't even begin to explain everything that was wrong with Amy because of the way she behaved. Liza, for the most part, was okay. She needed some therapy because they were preparing her for obedience and teaching her that what she would eventually experience was normal. But Amy had completely shut down. It took 2 months before I could get her to speak to me. Now she trusts me, and we often sit together, and I let her talk and open up about whatever she feels comfortable sharing. Her stories often leave me struggling not to cry while I try to comfort her. A few months ago, I got Amy a service dog trained specifically for the kind of emotional support she needs regularly. Her name is Spark, and honestly, she's the sweetest, best girl you could imagine. She knows exactly when Amy needs her and helps calm her anxiety a lot, especially in public. We've had more than a few encounters with entitled parents, completely unrelated to my family, who think they or their child deserve her dog more than she does. Let me know if you want me to post those stories, because I've noticed people like reading service dog incidents. But anyone who thinks that can fight me. Nobody deserves her dog more than she does. At one point, one of my aunts, whose husband went to prison, tried to take Spark because she claimed her money paid for the dog. I told her if she ever came near my property again, I would call the police, since there was already a restraining order against her involving my two sisters. Later she came back and tried to poison Spark with tainted meat, but one of my wonderful neighbors saw her and chased her away. We called the police. Now she's in prison too, along with having to pay a fine and some money to me, because at this point I'm pretty familiar with the legal system, and I sued her. My family still tried to take my sisters away from me, reporting me for everything from animal abuse to drug trafficking. At one point they planted drugs inside a stuffed animal identical to Amy's Comfort plush and left it in the yard. But Amy would never do something like that, so I immediately knew something was wrong. Home security systems are amazing. In fact, I've become pretty friendly with the local police officers who have to investigate those reports. They know I would never do anything that could risk my custody of the girls. They mean the world to me. I'll admit that I've done things that hurt my bond with them, like yelling when I'm stressed or occasionally throwing things. I'm not perfect. Amy has told me that even though those moments scare her, she doesn't feel unsafe around me when they happen. I usually spoil them a bit afterward when it happens. Now, the reason this ended up on the Am I the Asshole subreddit is because a few weeks ago my mother contacted me saying she wanted to talk. I hesitated, but I agreed, and we met in the next town over. There was no way it was going to happen at my house. My mother explained that she was in the process of divorcing my father and that she wanted a relationship with me and my sisters, with special emphasis on repairing her relationship with Amy, who hasn't called her mom in years. She explained that she had been pressured into marrying my father after getting pregnant with me, and that she never wanted that life for her daughters. I told her no, flat out. Several members of my family disagreed with that decision, because she could have done literally anything to support Amy emotionally while all of this was happening. She could have done anything at all to help Amy feel safer or more comforted. Instead, Amy was pushed aside and isolated except when the family needed her to cook, clean, or provide some kind of service. My mother would even scold her whenever Amy tried to confide in her about being in pain or afraid. Amy was far beyond her breaking point when I took her out of that house. She had even planned to commit suicide less than a week after my visit. My mother argued that she had the same right as other family members who left and still have contact with my sisters. But I told her the difference was that those relatives left to protect their children and themselves. They didn't wait a year after losing custody to start fighting for them. And honestly, I don't even need to give a reason. I have custody. She doesn't. People on that subreddit convinced me that when Amy is in a better mental place and Liza is older, I should bring it up to them and let the decision be theirs. I've been told Amy will likely remain dependent even after she turns 18. Her mind simply doesn't function normally anymore, so there's no real risk that our mother could contact her behind my back even once she becomes an adult. Amy does have a phone and a computer, but she doesn't have social media because she doesn't want any chance of our family trying to contact her. They threatened her with many forms of torture in the past. This story doesn't have a neat ending. I have my sisters, and they're in a safe environment where they can grow up like children. Amy is getting the help she needs and is slowly coming out of the emotional tower she built to protect herself in the only way she knew how. But she knows there's no rush to come out of it. I'll work with her at whatever pace she chooses. She's still discovering her own interests, but she enjoys simple things like reading a book while drinking fruity tea. She also has a small collection of stuffed animals, mostly Build-A-Bear ones, that she absolutely loves and carries one with her everywhere. She's sensitive to textures, so the feeling comforts her. Once a week we sit together and try to find older bears she might like. There are only 3 bears left on her wish list, and honestly I've loved helping Amy rediscover herself. She lost so much of her ability to think and feel independently during those years. Seeing her discover her favorite book genres or the kind of music she likes is an incredible feeling, knowing how far she's come. I live for the days when she manages to smile for real. I'm willing to answer most questions. So if you want to know something, ask. I want to raise awareness that things like this still happen to other children. Of course, there are some things I prefer to keep private for the girls' sake. Edit 1. First of all, thank you for the awards. It means a lot. And thank you to everyone offering kind words and support. Honestly, this past year has been very hard, and sometimes I really struggle. But I have to stay strong because my 2 girls depend on me so much. The support everyone has shown has meant the world. Some extra details. Amy was taken out of school at age 10, a few months after I left home. They kept her isolated in her room, and she had very little meaningful contact with anyone. Also, I'm not going to share a photo of Spark because she's a very recognizable dog, and not everyone who interacts with Amy and her dog knows the full story. I'd rather not create links between this story and their real everyday lives. Amy already deals with enough. Edit 2. Wow. This blew up overnight. Thank you for all the awards, and sorry if I can't respond to everyone. Also, today I'll be meeting with my mother again to talk about the possibility of her seeing the girls in the future, when Amy is much more stable and Liza is old enough to understand what happened. Ultimately, the decision will be entirely theirs. Edit 3. Answering some common questions so I don't have to repeat myself. Yes, I was also raised with these ideas, but in a very different way. I was taught that I could treat the women in my family however I wanted. But I was never a violent person or someone with a strong sexual drive. I was an idiot in some ways, and I still struggle with anger issues sometimes. But taking it out on other people never seemed effective to me. My focus was more on my studies. Some other men in my family were the same and were never abusive either. Unfortunately, it never clicked for me that if they were teaching me those things, they must have been teaching my sisters something very different behind my back. I fully blame myself for how much Amy suffered, and I try to make up for it by showing her the love that no one else cared enough to give her. I'm also in therapy. I work closely with Amy's therapist, so don't worry about my mental well-being. I'm taking care of myself too. And for those saying the story is fake because I didn't go into full legal detail, during the entire legal battle, I was surviving on just a few hours of sleep some days, constantly reviewing every possible detail to figure out how to help my sisters. A lot of that time is just a blurry mess in my memory. I also didn't think many people would care to hear it. I had to cut huge parts of my story, and even then some people were still saying it was too long. The story sounds unbelievable. I get it. I wouldn't want to believe it either. You don't have to say it. Just downvote and move on. I don't care what you choose to believe. They pulled Amy out of school using the excuse that they were homeschooling her. I'm not sure how they managed it after that. I was never homeschooled, and I didn't homeschool the girls either. I don't know how my family managed things with social services or whatever system was involved. I just know it somehow worked for 6 years. Update 2. This incident happened months ago. Amy absolutely adores her dog. We spent a few months working with the trainer to adapt Spark to Amy's needs, including teaching strangers to respect Amy's personal space bubble. One thing I hear a lot from people is that it's hard not to pet service dogs because they want to let the dog know it's a good dog. But trust me, we let her know that all the time. Amy brushes Spark every day, and we never leave the house without a pocket full of treats. I have 3 different stories about entitled parents and kids who think they deserve Amy's dog more than she does. To keep this post from becoming enormous, I'll share them separately. The first happened less than a month after we got Spark. We were at a local park that allowed dogs off leash, so we let our dog run around for a bit. She wasn't wearing her vest because it was playtime, but I had it with me in case she needed to go into service mode for my sister, which wasn't uncommon. I try to take Amy and Liza to the park every day. Otherwise, Amy tends to hide under her blankets whenever she can, and it's good for her to be outside in public and get fresh air. We were playing fetch with Spark, taking turns throwing the ball for our happy dog. About an hour into our usual 2-hour walk, Amy started getting a little restless. It happens sometimes. There's not always a reason. She just gets anxious and scared easily. Over time, I've learned to recognize when she's getting distressed. So we called Spark back, and I helped put her vest on. When she's not wearing it, kids often come over to pet her and join the game. But when Amy gets anxious, it's best if Spark focuses only on her. A girl, maybe around 9 years old, definitely older than Liza, walked over with her mom, who had one of those obviously fake smiles. She didn't have the typical, "Can I speak to the manager?" haircut, but she definitely had the kind that says, "I think I'm better than you and I'm going to make sure you know it." We'll call her Karen and her daughter Susie. "Why did you stop playing?" Susie was really enjoying watching you play with your dog. In fact, she was asking me to let her play with him, and I said yes. So would you mind letting her throw the ball? With a polite smile, I said, I'm sorry, ma'am. Our dog is an emotional support dog, and right now she needs to take care of my sister. I'm not sure why you told your daughter she could play with my sister's dog. I certainly wouldn't tell my girls it's okay to play with other people's things. While explaining this, I moved so I was standing between her and Amy, who was now sitting on the ground focusing on her dog and trying to steady herself. I'm very protective of my sisters, so I didn't give the woman any space to get closer. Amy was sitting on the ground, breathing heavily while Spark did her job. I told Liza to sit with her big sister and help if she needed it, since sometimes Amy needs help calming down. That's not real, Karen snapped. Your sister isn't blind. She doesn't need a working dog. If you're going to be lazy, at least let my daughter play with that mutt. Guide dogs aren't the only type of service dog, ma'am. My sister's dog helps her with anxiety and other mental health issues. And now she's wearing her vest, so disturbing our dog is actually illegal because she needs to focus on my sister. Dogs shouldn't be forced to work for people, Karen replied. It's wrong that you've enslaved that poor animal. Ma'am, our dog isn't enslaved. She's simply trained to recognize when my sister needs help or needs to calm down. I even took classes to learn how to better support my sister. Our dog is treated like part of the family, and she enjoys helping Amy. Now we need to head home so I can make dinner for my sisters. As I turned toward them, I saw Susie trying to grab Spark's tail. Liza simply plopped down behind the dog, turning her back to Susie and starting to pet Spark's back. She had clearly decided she'd had enough, and that there was no way Amy was going to calm down there. I started gathering the girls to head home, even though it was an hour earlier than usual. I turned and helped Amy up from the ground. By that point, she was crying and shaking, and she wouldn't let go of Spark, who was fully alert because of Amy's condition. Liza complained about leaving early while I clipped Spark's leash on and hugged Amy, letting her hold part of the leash while I held the handle just in case. I've read way too many stories on Reddit. As we started walking, Susie suddenly lunged forward and jumped onto our dog. Amy screamed and dropped to the ground, curling up with her hands over her head in complete panic. I pushed the girl away from Spark, who was limping and whining but still immediately went to Amy and positioned herself over her. By then Spark was pretty upset and growling at Karen and Susie for scaring her person and hurting her. The girl started crying because I pushed her away from the puppy she really, really loved, and because all she wanted was a ride on the dog's back. For the record, that kid was almost twice Spark's size. Karen then stormed toward me, practically foaming at the mouth. Give me that dog right now, or I'm going to report you for raping my daughter. Ma'am, my sisters are in my custody because they were abused by our family. If you accuse me of something that could make me lose them, I will sue you for defamation. Now your daughter injured my sister's dog, so we're taking her to the vet. Would you give me your information so I can send you the vet bill? As I said that, I pointed to a nearby bathroom building that had a security camera on the side. I was pretty sure everything had been recorded. Karen, looking furious and shocked, reluctantly gave me her phone number before grabbing her daughter and storming off. But I made sure to write down her license plate too before calling the police, just in case she actually tried to make that accusation. I'm extremely careful when it comes to my sister's custody. I don't trust most of my family, and losing them would destroy me. We took Spark to the vet. Luckily, she only had minor sprains in her back and rear legs. I sent Karen the details of the vet bill, and surprise, surprise, she refused to pay until I threatened to take her to court. Spark and all her training weren't cheap. In Australia, service dogs can cost anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000. I won't say exactly how much she cost, but it was closer to the higher end, and she's worth every penny. After some back and forth, Karen reluctantly paid. Then 3 days later, she contacted me saying she was going to sue me to get the money back. I simply told her I'd see her in court. It's been about 7 months and nothing has happened. I've never understood how people think they're entitled to someone else's pet. I didn't mind buying Spark for Amy, but she was far more expensive than a normal dog. And this Karen didn't even believe she had special training. Our dog is fine now, and honestly having her has taken a huge weight off my shoulders. I no longer feel like I have to constantly hover over Amy to make sure she's okay. But please remember, never disturb a service dog. Their attention needs to stay on their person. This was actually the mildest of the 3 stories. In the other 2, the police had to get involved. Update 3. So this is the second of my 3 encounters with entitled parents related to my little sister's service dog. Sorry it took me so long to post. Recently I've been dealing with more issues with my mom, and I'm basically a single potato taking care of 2 tiny needy potatoes. I'm also far from the best storyteller or writer in general, so please bear with me. And this one is long. As I briefly mentioned in my other story, I do my best to make sure Amy gets outside for at least an hour every day. Usually that means taking a family walk with her service dog, which she enjoys and is very used to by now. On that particular day, a new playground had just opened nearby. I thought it might be fun to take the girls somewhere different. Amy also loves playing fetch with Spark, her service dog. Spark is a mix between a purebred German Shepherd and a mixed breed dog with several different breeds. She was specifically bred for a calmer temperament and to be easier to train. I made sure to check the local rules about dogs being off-leash. As a service dog, she can go pretty much anywhere as long as she's wearing her leash and vest and isn't bothering anyone. There was a nearby field where off-leash dogs were allowed, but the area around the playground only allowed dogs on a leash, which is pretty normal where I live. So, armed with poop bags, sunscreen, water, and Spark's vest and leash, we drove to the new park. New places make Amy nervous, so we walked around for a bit to help her get familiar with where everything was. During that time, Spark wore her vest and leash, walking obediently beside Amy like the good girl she is. Since there were quite a few little kids around, we didn't want them distracting her, but most of them seemed to understand what Spark's vest meant. However, one girl in particular, let's call her entitled kid, came up and asked if she could play with Spark. Amy has selective mutism and can't speak in most situations, so it was up to me to explain that Spark was working right now and couldn't be distracted. I pointed toward the field and said maybe we could play there later if Amy felt up to it. Usually Amy doesn't mind other people throwing the ball as long as they don't actually touch Spark or her. Entitled kid huffed and said dogs are meant for playing, not working. I asked if she'd ever seen police dogs on TV or something like that. She hesitantly said yes, and I explained that those are another type of working dog. Spark's job is to take care of my sister because she scares easily, and her dog makes sure she doesn't hurt herself if she panics. The girl then turned toward Amy, who was starting to get restless and kept tugging on my shirt, her silent signal that she wanted to get away from the situation. Spark had already moved into her alert stance, which she does when she senses something that might trigger Amy or put her in danger. Then entitled kid suddenly raised her arms and yelled, "B.O." Of course, that made Amy jump. She hid behind me and started crying. Even today, Amy is very shy and doesn't handle unfamiliar environments with loud noises or sudden movements very well. The girl started laughing and called Amy retarded. Liza, who is very protective of her older sister, shoved the girl and scolded her for being so mean. At that point, I decided we'd had enough of that kid and hurried my sisters away to find somewhere Amy could calm down in peace. We found a spot out of sight of the girl and sat Amy down on a shaded bench so I could help her calm down before deciding whether we should just go home. Luckily, it wasn't as bad as her usual anxiety attacks. She was just breathing hard, hot, and crying quietly. I asked if she wanted to leave, but she shook her head and asked if we could just stay away from the entitled kid. Liza still wanted to play on the playground, and Amy said she didn't want Spark off-leash. I hesitated but agreed. Since Amy is trying to work through her anxiety, sometimes she wants to push herself outside her comfort zone. My job is just to watch closely and make sure she doesn't push too hard. The next little while was peaceful. Liza played on the playground while Amy and I sat in the shade with Spark lying under the bench and Amy reading a book. As expected, more kids came over asking to pet our dog, but I politely declined without any issues. No sign of entitled kid, or so I thought. Suddenly she came running toward Amy and me with her mother right behind her, pointing at me while rambling about animal abuse. Honestly, I was paying more attention to my sister than to what the woman was saying, so the conversation isn't word for word. This happened months ago anyway. The mother looked me up and down like I didn't belong there. My suburb is the next one over and is considered slightly more upper class. She asked if Spark was my dog. I explained that Spark is registered in my name, but is officially Amy's service dog. In Australia, if you're under 18, your parents or guardians are considered the dog's owners, even if the registered service dog is working for a minor. When Amy turns 18, ownership of Spark will be transferred to her. The mother gave me a look like I had just slapped her daughter. Then she snarled something like, "How dare you force an innocent animal to work and brainwash it so it can't do anything but obey your commands?" I just shrugged and told her she was entitled to her opinion, then asked her to leave because she was upsetting Amy. Instead, she demanded that I hand over the dog, because a spectacular dog like mine shouldn't be forced into slavery. I simply said nope and waved her off. Surprisingly, she actually left, her daughter whining that she wanted a dog well-trained enough to sit like Spark. About half an hour later, we were packing up to leave when Amy quietly asked if we could throw the ball for Spark just a little bit, because she felt it wasn't fair that her dog had to miss out on all the fun. So we went back to the field and took off Spark's leash and vest after making sure entitled kid and her mother weren't nearby. Extra detail. Spark's tags also say she's a service dog and include my name, address, and phone number. That will be important later. We started a small game of fetch, taking turns throwing the ball like we normally do. The park is designed so that the field is right next to the parking lot, separated by a row of bushes. The area we were in had a few trees providing shade over some picnic tables. When it was Liza's turn to throw the ball, she accidentally hit a tree and it bounced through the bushes. Spark ran after it. I told my sisters to stay where they were while I followed, just to make sure she didn't run into the road. Even though Liza's throw wasn't very strong, Spark wasn't right behind the bushes like I expected. In fact, I couldn't find her immediately after pushing through them. I looked around for a moment before hearing Spark's distressed barking. I ran toward the parking lot and found a family of 5 struggling to shove Spark into the back of their car. The family included entitled kid, her mother, her father, a boy, probably the middle child, and an older girl who seemed to be the oldest sibling. The father was holding Spark's muzzle shut while the kids tried to shove her into the trunk. My dog wasn't making it easy. The mother seemed unwilling to get close, and the father was struggling to control her head, so they were having a hard time. I yelled at them to let go of my dog. Several things happened in quick succession. First, the entitled dad lost his grip on Spark's head as the 2 girls jumped back, leaving the boy holding her back legs in the air. Spark barked several times before the father tried again to grab her muzzle. She responded by biting his arm and lunging toward the boy, snapping until she managed to bite his ankle, and then bolted straight to me. I grabbed her collar and shouted several choice insults at the family for trying to steal my dog. Right then, a security guard arrived, saying someone had reported an incident and asking what was going on. At that moment, Amy and Liza also came looking for me, probably after hearing the barking and shouting and wondering why I was taking so long. Amy was on the verge of a panic attack, and Spark was struggling against my grip trying to get to her. So I let go and told Amy and Liza to quickly put Spark's vest and leash back on. The father was now yelling at the guard that they had found what they assumed was an abandoned dog and were planning to take the poor thing to a shelter so they could adopt it. Then, according to him, I showed up and started beating the dog until it got so scared it bit him and his son. Now he was demanding that the dog be put down immediately. The guard looked at Spark, who was standing defensively in front of my sisters and growling at the family. Then he looked at me and asked for my side of the story. Thinking this might take a while, I asked him to wait a moment while I moved my sisters and Spark away from the road and into the shade. Amy was having a panic attack at the idea that her dog might be euthanized, sobbing and begging me to protect her. At that point, I just wanted to take her home, where it's much easier to calm her down. So I went back to the guard and the family and explained the bad throw of the ball, how I followed Spark to make sure she didn't run into the road, and how I found the family trying to steal my sister's service dog. At that point, the entitled mom interrupted me, screeching that this was proof I was abusing the dog and that no dog should ever be forced to work. Then the guard paused for a moment before saying that his grandmother has a guide dog because she's going blind. That immediately made the family go quiet. The guard then turned to the kids and asked if they had been trying to put the dog into the car. The oldest girl confirmed it. He asked if they had waited to see whether someone would claim the dog. She shook her head, and then the entitled mom quickly claimed that the dog didn't have any tags. I pointed to Spark's beautiful handmade collar, bright purple and blue, and said it had my phone number and address on it. Then I asked the guard if he could just let me take my sisters home. At that point, I didn't even care about pressing charges for the attempted kidnapping of Spark. I just wanted to get Amy home because she was really struggling to calm down. Thankfully, the guard understood. He took my information and explained that the situation would most likely go to the police because my dog had bitten 2 people. I wasn't too worried about that because the law in my state says that if a dog bites or attacks someone, it can be put down unless it's proven that the dog was provoked. He said he would make sure to save all the security footage as evidence because it was very clear that I cared about my dog and my family. He let me leave, but warned me that Spark had to remain registered under my name and her residence couldn't change, or it could cause worse legal consequences. I assured him we weren't going anywhere and hurried my sisters to the car so we could go home. I drove out of the parking lot but stopped at another nearby lot next to a sports field so I could try to calm Amy down. I went through our usual routine to help ground her in the present, then hugged her and talked to her until the panic attack slowly faded. She was still shaky when I started driving again, but I wanted to get her home where she could lie down and relax. She held onto the toy she had brought and hugged Spark the entire ride home while quietly crying. Amy usually sits in the back seat with Spark and Liza wherever we go. When we got home, we ordered takeout from Amy's favorite restaurant for dinner and watched a movie together while curled up on the pull-out couch. The girls fell asleep there, so I just left them. This was before Amy went back to school, but the next day I let her skip her tutoring sessions and worked from home because she was still affected by everything that happened. The police later contacted me about Spark biting 2 people, but they confirmed that they had watched the security footage and agreed that Spark had clearly been provoked into acting that way. There was also a whole court process where the family insisted the attack was unprovoked and claimed they were only trying to help what they believed was a stray dog. But one of the cameras clearly captured Spark's collar with my phone number on it. Not to mention that entitled mom and entitled kid had already seen me and my sister twice earlier that day, which the cameras also recorded. In the end, the parents were fined and given community service. Since I just wanted the whole thing to be over, I didn't push the matter any further. But we haven't gone back to that park since. Edit. Hi Redditors. Sorry for the long wait. I've been having some issues with my mom regarding the girls, and things have been pretty busy lately, so this might feel a bit rushed. The incident affected Amy for a few days, but after a lot of reassurance and reminding her that her dog would be okay, she eventually calmed down. She is much more selective now about who is allowed to touch Spark. A lot of people asked how they could help and even offered to send things. I'd like to say that while that's incredibly kind, Amy is very particular about her toys, what she plays with, and even what's in her room. Random things can scare her sometimes. Most gifts she receives from people are money or gift cards, so she can choose things herself. That said, I'm not asking for any of that at all. We're actually doing pretty well financially right now. A friend helped me get a job in the field I was studying for, even though I technically wasn't qualified yet at the time. I'm very grateful for that, and the pay is more than enough to support my little family. Combined with therapy costs being covered by our parents and the child support they have to pay, we're all living comfortably. If you feel like doing something kind to support us, consider donating to charities that help prevent child abuse, support victim groups, or organizations like that. Even though we're doing okay, many kids aren't, and they need safe places to live. Supporting those causes would mean a lot more than sending us gifts. That being said, one of Amy's favorite mobile games now has a feature where you can add friends. Not many kids at her school play it, so I told her I'd ask here. If you play Merge Dragons and want to add her, Amy's username is Buddha. She loves seeing different parks from other players. Update 4. Sorry for disappearing for a while. Things got really busy around Christmas and over the last few months, and I hadn't even logged into Reddit for quite some time. The other day it crossed my mind, so I figured I'd give an update to anyone curious about how the girls and I are doing. First of all, we're all doing great. Amy's therapy has been going really well, and she's becoming more comfortable in social environments. She still has selective mutism, but she's improving. She is now officially a completely healthy girl physically. She completed the last of her medical procedures and physical therapy at the end of January. At the beginning, she had a lot of problems with her bones and was also malnourished, but all of that has been resolved now. She's showing a lot more emotion, actively seeks affection from people she trusts, and has far fewer nightmares than she did a few months ago. Amy still needs regular therapy, but her therapist has been praising her progress. School has also been going well. A lot of people asked how Amy keeps up academically. The simple answer is that she doesn't. Right now, the main focus of school for Amy is learning how to socialize. There's no pressure for her to maintain grades or perform well on exams. That can be worked on later. Her teachers even give her easier work, even though she's already 2 years behind the grade level for her age. Liza is doing well in school too. She seems to take after me because she's very smart and is near the top of her grade. I'm really proud of her. Since my last update, I sat down with Liza and went into more detail about what was happening when she lived with our parents. She started asking about seeing them again. If it were up to me, that would never happen. But it's her right to make that decision when she's older. Little by little, I'll tell her more about what really happened. Until she has the full story, I won't let her decide whether she wants supervised visits with our parents. I also finished my studies in my field of work and got promoted fairly quickly once I was officially qualified. That allows me to work from home more often and spend more time with my girls. And yes, for those wondering, I call them my girls. Why wouldn't I? I've also worked through a lot of my anger issues, and it's been quite a while since my last outburst. Some people had been concerned about that. We also moved at the end of September, and since then we haven't had any negative encounters with entitled parents. The girls still go to the same school, and our new house has a bigger backyard that Spark absolutely loves. Spark herself is doing great too. That's about all the important information I can think of right now. I'm happy to answer more questions in the comments. Thanks to everyone for the support, and hopefully I'll get around to posting the final story about entitled parents and Spark soon. A message from Amy. Hi readers. I wanted to say thank you for being nice and helping my brother and for saying kind things about Liza and me. Potato read the comments to us and told us how many people wished us well, and that was really nice of everyone. Thank you for being kind, and I hope everyone has a nice day or night. It's night now and I'm going to sleep. Pandemic update. For the few people who asked, and for those who didn't, we're all doing okay. We started self-isolating a while ago because Amy's immune system isn't the best even under normal circumstances. My girlfriend has been doing the grocery shopping for us. Meanwhile, the girls and I have fully embraced the world of hot chocolate and Animal Crossing.